If you're new to AskReddit cheating drama, make sure to subscribe and like the video. It only takes a few seconds, but it really motivates us to create more crazy cheating stories. Now let's get into the story. I wasn't expecting him to look like that. When I opened the door that Tuesday afternoon, still barefoot, still sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, I thought I'd see some vague echo of the boy I used to know, slightly taller, maybe a little more filled out. But the man standing in my doorway was someone else entirely. Adrian, my cousin. Distant, technically. His mother and my father were half-siblings. Growing up, we'd only see each other during long, sticky summer breaks at our grandmother's house, when we were still young enough to sleep in bunk beds and share secrets over popsicles. But it had been over a decade since I'd seen him in person. Social media only gave glimpses. A graduation photo here, a tagged image at a wedding there. He'd become somewhat of a mystery I never thought I'd solve, but there he was. Taller than I remembered, broad-shouldered, his jaw lined with the kind of stubble that looked too perfect to be accidental. A duffel bag slung over one arm, his other hand already raised to knock, and when his eyes met mine, they didn't just flicker with recognition, they lingered. I realized, far too late, that I was wearing a short dress, thin fabric, no bra, just something I threw on to survive the heat of the apartment. His eyes dropped, quickly, politely, but not before I caught the pause. That fraction of a second too long. Something shifted in the air. "Claire," he said, smiling with that half-laugh I remembered, "you look grown up." I laughed, tried to play it off. "So do you. Come in, make yourself at home." As he stepped inside, I suddenly became aware of everything. How quiet the apartment was, how close the kitchen was to the sofa, how intimate the space now felt with someone like him inside it. He was only supposed to stay a few days, just until he found his own place. A simple favor. Family helping family. But in that single glance, my bare legs, his surprised stare, the unspoken charge in the air, I felt something unravel, not loudly, not instantly, but like a seam quietly splitting open, thread by invisible thread. Looking back now, I can tell you this. That wasn't the beginning of love. It wasn't even the beginning of desire. It was the beginning of danger. He was easy to live with. Too easy. Adrian only brought a single duffel bag with him, yet somehow his presence filled every corner of my apartment. He was polite, quiet, almost overly considerate, washing dishes before I even asked, folding the throw blanket after movie nights, always knocking gently before entering the kitchen in the morning, like he was stepping into sacred space. And maybe, in some strange way, he was. At first it felt normal, natural. Two adults under the same roof, reconnecting over shared childhood memories. We laughed about our old bike races through the neighborhood, the time I made him eat a crayon on a dare, how we once tried to fake a snake sighting just to get out of dinner with relatives. It was harmless, comforting even. But the thing about memories is, they're intimate. And the more we remembered together, the more I started to see him not as a cousin, not as a guest, but as something dangerously close to familiar. One night we stayed up too late. Wine, music, and the kind of warm summer air that makes the night feel suspended in time. I don't remember how we got on the topic, but he said something like, "You always had that look, even back then, like you knew something the rest of us didn't." I laughed it off, but I felt it. That flutter, that rush of blood to my chest, not quite shame, not quite thrill. I caught myself noticing things, the way his shirt clung to his back when he cooked. The way he always smelled faintly like cedar and clean laundry, the way he would lean against the counter when he talked to me, just close enough for me to feel the heat from his skin. But it was nothing, right? I told myself that over and over. There were no touches, no crossed lines, just stories and music and shared silences that lasted a second too long. Just the way his eyes softened when I talked about my work. Just the way my pulse quickened when I walked into the room and found him already there. He looked at me like I was real, not just a woman working late into the night, not just another profile on a screen, not just someone existing between inboxes and to-do lists. And I started dressing differently. Not deliberately. At least, not at first. But I found myself choosing shorts instead of leggings, letting my robe hang open longer in the mornings, applying lip balm before walking out of my room, even if I wasn't going anywhere. These little things that added up to a quiet confession I didn't know I was making. One afternoon, he was fixing something under the sink, and I caught myself watching the way the muscles in his arms moved. Just watching. Silently. Wanting. And when he looked up at me from the floor, eyes meeting mine, sweat on his temple, that easy smile on his lips, I looked away first. That was the moment I realized I was waiting for something. A moment. A word. A mistake. Something that would let me stop pretending this was nothing. But for now, it still was. Harmless. Almost. It was never one big moment. No dramatic kiss in the rain, no clumsy fall into each other's arms. It was slow. Adrift. A quiet series of almosts. And that's what made it dangerous. One night, he came home late from a work meeting. I was already curled up on the couch in my oversized sweater, some mindless series playing in the background. I wasn't expecting him to talk to me. He usually just said goodnight and disappeared into the guest room. But that night, he sat down beside me. Closer than usual. "Can't sleep," he said, voice low, almost tired. "Me neither," I replied. I didn't move away. We watched the screen in silence, the kind of silence that buzzes at the edges. I could feel the warmth of his thigh next to mine. I could smell the faint trace of his cologne. Our arms touched, barely, but neither of us moved. I remember holding my breath for no reason at all. That was the first moment I let the possibility in, not just the idea that he was looking at me a certain way, but that I wanted him to. After that, it was like walking through a fog. Everything felt suspended, untouchable but overwhelmingly real. He started making me coffee in the mornings, just the way I liked it, without me ever telling him how. I started waiting for the sound of the bathroom door in the morning, just to catch a glimpse of him shirtless, towel slung over his shoulder like it meant nothing. But to me, it did. Sometimes we touched. Barely. Accidental. But we both felt it. His hand brushing against mine when we passed each other a plate. The brief contact of his fingers on my lower back when I squeezed past him in the narrow kitchen. His knee resting too close to mine on the couch, neither of us pulling away. I began to narrate everything in my mind, just so I could convince myself it wasn't real. He's just being kind. He doesn't mean it. This is family. Don't be ridiculous. But then there were things I couldn't explain away, like the time he caught me stretching in my room, door half open, my tank top riding up a little too high. He stood there a second too long, said nothing, just watched. Or the night we both reached for the same bowl and our fingers locked. He didn't pull away, and neither did I. There was no flirting, no teasing, just presence. An undeniable gravity between us that pulled every word, every look, into something charged. I found myself thinking of him in the quietest moments, when brushing my teeth, when lying in bed alone, when slipping into clothes in the morning. I wondered if he thought of me, too. One night, I passed by his door and paused. I could hear him moving inside, nothing loud, just the rustle of sheets, the creak of the bed. I stood there longer than I should have, hand hovering over the frame. I didn't knock, I didn't go in, but I wanted to, and that was when I knew the truth. The line between us had already started to blur. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally, and emotional betrayal, I would later learn, is much quieter. Much softer, but it cuts just as deep. It happened in the quiet. Not in a rush of passion, not with fireworks or breathless confessions, just silence. Heavy, suspended, undeniable. It was a stormy night, the kind that shakes the windows and makes everything feel closer. We lost power just after dinner. The lights blinked once, then died, plunging the apartment into soft, flickering candlelight from the ones I kept on the shelf for nights like this. We were sitting at the kitchen table, finishing the last of the wine. The shadows danced across his face in ways I had never seen before. Or maybe I had. Maybe I just hadn't let myself linger long enough to notice. "I forgot how peaceful this can be," he said, swirling the wine in his glass. "No screens, no noise. Just now." I smiled, nodding. My heart was doing that thing again, fluttering without reason. Or maybe there was a reason, and I had simply stopped pretending there wasn't. "I used to love thunderstorms as a kid," I said. "It felt like the world paused, like time gave you permission to feel a little more." He looked at me. Not just a glance, but really looked. And for once, I didn't look away. The silence stretched between us. Not awkward, not uncertain, just full. Full of every unsaid word, every moment we didn't name but had both carefully kept in our pockets like secret things we didn't dare unfold. He set his glass down. I didn't move. And when he reached out and touched my hand, gently, like he was afraid I might shatter, I let him. His thumb brushed across my knuckles. It was such a small gesture, so simple, but it was also everything. We both knew. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to say something, anything, but I was afraid if I spoke, the whole moment would vanish like smoke. So I just looked at him, and he whispered, barely audible, "Claire, if this is wrong, tell me now." But I didn't. I couldn't. Because in that moment, nothing had ever felt more right. His hand moved up, fingers grazing my wrist, my arm, until they found my face. He cupped my cheek so tenderly it broke something in me. I leaned into his palm like I'd been waiting for it my entire life, and when he kissed me, soft, hesitant, aching, I kissed him back, not out of lust, not out of rebellion, but out of longing, out of months, years of not being truly seen, of craving connection so desperately I was willing to reach for it in the dark, even when I knew I shouldn't. We didn't sleep together that night. That line somehow remained unbroken, but the kiss was enough, more than enough. Because after that, there was no going back. We had crossed something far deeper than a physical boundary. We had stepped into a space where the rules no longer applied. Where feelings meant more than names. Where desire whispered louder than blood. And that terrified me. Because I knew. What we'd just touched couldn't be undone. After the kiss, everything became quieter. Not in the way of retreat, but reverence. Like the hush of a church after someone dares to speak. We didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. It was there. In the way his eyes lingered on me a second longer, the way his body found its place next to mine without hesitation, the way I started expecting him in every corner of my day. We became careful, but not distant. There were no more kisses, not at first. But we touched more. Light brushes of fingers when we passed each other in the hallway, a hand resting on my back as I stood at the sink. Once, he sat behind me on the couch and reached for my hair, slowly running his fingers through it, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. My whole body had stilled, burning. He started calling me Claire Bear again, an old nickname from childhood. But when he said it now, it sounded different, more like a memory kissed with want. And me? I started timing my showers to when he was in the kitchen, so he'd hear the water, imagine the steam. I hated myself for that. But I did it anyway. One morning I caught him watching me pour coffee, just standing in the hallway, shirtless, his gaze heavy on my thighs. When I turned and met his eyes, he didn't look away. I didn't either. That day, I couldn't focus on my work. I stared at my laptop for hours, rereading the same email again and again. My stomach twisted, not in fear, but in anticipation, in hunger. And that hunger scared me more than guilt ever could. I told myself, we haven't done anything. But we had. Emotionally, we were tangled in ways I couldn't undo. I knew what he meant when he said nothing. He knew what I meant when I smiled a little too long. And every night he didn't come to my room, I both exhaled in relief and ached in disappointment. One night, I woke from a restless dream. I couldn't remember the details, only that it was him, that his hands had been on my skin, that I hadn't wanted him to stop. I found myself standing outside his bedroom door, again, like before, but this time I knocked. Just once, barely audible. The door opened slowly. He was awake, or maybe he never slept. He looked at me for a long moment, eyes dark, unreadable. I didn't go in. He didn't ask me to. We just stood there. And for a second, I felt the full weight of what we'd become, a secret with no shape, no name, no safe ending. "I can't sleep," I whispered. "I know," he said softly. He reached for my hand, and in that moment, that small, seemingly harmless act, I knew. I was no longer the same person. Something inside me had shifted, not because I wanted him, but because I wanted to matter, to be chosen, to be seen as something more than just safe or convenient or forgettable. And Adrian, he saw me. Not just my face, not just my body. He saw the emptiness, the parts I kept hidden even from myself. But even as I stood there, fingers laced with his in the dim hallway light, a voice inside me whispered, "You're going to lose everything." And the worst part? Another voice answered back, "I already have." It didn't end with a fight. There were no slammed doors, no accusations, no tears on the floor. It ended the way paper burns, quietly, curling at the edges, until all that's left is ash and the scent of something that used to be. I don't remember the last time he touched me. Not exactly. It just stopped. The small gestures faded first. No more hand on my back, no more brushing fingers when we passed a cup or a plate, no more lingering goodnights in the hallway. Instead, there was space. Measured, intentional space, like he was gently pulling a thread, unraveling us without force, without confrontation. And I let him. Because part of me knew we couldn't keep going like that. We had reached the edge, danced too close to something neither of us were brave enough or foolish enough to fully claim. He started spending more time out of the apartment, longer hours at work, quick errands that stretched late into the evening. When he came home, he no longer sought me out in the kitchen. He'd eat, shower, disappear into his room. And me? I became a ghost inside my own home. I started leaving the door to my room open, just in case he passed by. He never did. Once I tried to say something. I don't even remember the words. Something casual, light, like asking if he wanted to watch a movie. He looked at me and smiled. Polite, distant. I think that was the moment I realized it was over. Whatever it had been. He never acknowledged the kiss. Never spoke of the nights we stood too close, the silences thick with everything we didn't dare say. And neither did I. We were two people who had shared a secret, and were now quietly burying it between them. The night before he left, he stood at the doorway to my room, suitcase by his side. "I found a place downtown," he said. "Moving in tomorrow." I nodded, heart thudding painfully slow. "I figured." He hesitated, just for a second. "I'll see you around, Claire." That was it. No hug, no goodbye, just a sentence that hung in the air like smoke. A sentence that said, "I miss you, and I'm sorry, and we both know we can't come back from this without ever needing to." When the door clicked shut behind him the next morning, I didn't cry. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the space where his shoes used to be, at the coffee mug he always reached for first. I felt hollow, like I had given a part of myself to something that was never mine to keep. And the truth is, I hadn't just lost Adrian, I had lost me, the version of myself who once believed she knew her limits, who once thought emotional betrayal only belonged to movies or strangers, who once thought being desired meant being loved. But I understand now. Desire is not devotion. Attention is not affection. And closeness, no matter how electric, doesn't always mean connection. Sometimes it just means two people were lonely in the same place at the same time. And when the silence finally settled, for real, for good, it didn't echo. It just stayed. Heavy. Permanent. Weeks have passed. Or maybe months. Time feels strange now. The apartment is quiet again, truly quiet. Not the charged silence of two people pretending not to want each other, but the empty kind. The kind that echoes when you drop a spoon or close a book too quickly. Sometimes I still reach for 2 mugs in the morning. Sometimes I still expect to hear his footsteps outside my door. But mostly I just sit in this stillness and try to make sense of what I became. It wasn't the kiss that ruined me. It wasn't the near touching or the candlelit conversations or the way his eyes felt like answers I'd spent my whole life chasing. It was the lie I told myself, that because we hadn't crossed every line, I was still intact. That I was still good, still innocent, still safe. But emotional betrayal doesn't need a bedroom. It only needs a moment of weakness dressed up as longing. And I had hundreds of those moments. I let them bloom inside me. I watered them with silence. I called them harmless, but they weren't. I betrayed something, not just the rules of blood or morality or what society calls appropriate. I betrayed myself, my sense of right, my boundaries, my ability to say no when it mattered most. And for what? For someone who never promised anything. For someone who left without turning back. For a connection that only ever existed in borrowed time and quiet rooms. The worst part isn't that he's gone. The worst part is that when I look at myself in the mirror, I no longer see the same woman. I see someone who let herself be undone by loneliness, who mistook attention for love, who wanted so badly to feel chosen that she forgot how to choose herself. And even now, if I close my eyes, I can still feel the warmth of his hand on mine. Not because it meant forever, but because it meant I was no longer invisible. And that, more than desire, more than guilt, is what haunts me the most. Because once someone makes you feel seen, it's nearly impossible to forget the shape of that feeling, even after they're gone.